All right, EJ, the dark day is upon us. It is Packers Day, where we have to talk positively about the Green Bay Packers for roughly an hour and everything they're doing right and everything that they're doing to make Bears fans' life a living hell. We actually have to celebrate that for the first time all year. I'm not looking forward to it, but at the same time, I do find them a very fascinating team to talk about because they had one of the most under-the-radar, wildest off seasons of anybody in the league. Beyond the whole, Rodgers, will they, won't they thing and the Devontae Adams trade, the amount of moves that they had to make just to keep themselves above water was incredible. And here's the thing, they pulled it off. They actually pulled it off. They kept most of their core together, keyword most. When going into the offseason, I thought they were left for dead. I thought they were screwed. But Brian Gutekunst and the rest of the front office and the coaching staff pulled out all the stops and made everything happen that they possibly could have made happen. And they're still in a pretty commanding position. So hats off to them. It's the only time you'll catch me cheersing the Packers this year. But by the way, I grabbed my Angels Envy Caribbean Cask Rye, one of the greatest ryes ever to grace this planet, to get me through tonight. But yeah, it's Packers Day, EJ. Let's do this shit.
Yeah, I'm prepared. I had cheese for dinner, so I'm all set. I'm an expert now. No, I'm not upset at all about talking about the Packers. They are a fascinating franchise and very talented and still in the driver's seat in the NFC North. We'll talk about that. And all the moves they made, like you said, they made a lot. They kept some, let some go, had 11 draft picks this year. So lots of movement, lots of new faces. I think the end result is probably about the same. We'll end up talking about that. But yeah, for one day, I can take my Bears hat off and talk about the Packers with vim and vigor. And after that, I can, go back to being a Bears fan, and it's fine. But I have a lot of respect for what they're able to do, and they've got a lot of great players. So the dirty little secret about the Packers is I usually love their drafts, and it bothers the hell out of me. And this year's no different. So we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Well, why don't we start off by doing our little 2021 recap, which we do for every single team. No real change of pace last year compared to what we're used to. 13-4, first in the division. Virtually unassailable at home. They were 8-0 at home at Lambeau. 5-4 on the road. So, again, above average winning percentage on the road. And they ended up being, once again, right at the very top of the NFC, where we're used to seeing them. Closed out December really strong. Also, once again, where we're used to seeing them, losing to San Francisco in January, but it's neither here nor there. We'll blame special teams for that one. Sorry, had to get the dig in. I know Packers fans, a whole bunch of them just flipped off the podcast in a rage. But hey, man, maybe beat San Francisco once in January, and I'll stop making fun of you for it. But yeah, no, 2021 was a very usual Packers season. Dominant in the regular season. Somehow not getting it done in January despite looking like an absolute threshing machine. Not going to lie, going into 2022, I kind of expect very little to be different outside of a couple key things we're going to talk about throughout the episode. But for the most part, the core is still together. The coaching staff is still great. The quarterback is still one of the best to ever do it. It's looking like same old Packers going into 2022.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Up and down the line, I don't think that there's going to be significant change in the Packers' results. There may be significant change in their roster. There's not going to be a crazy change in results until there is no Aaron Rodgers or until he drops off a cliff skill-wise, which is clearly not happening. He is still functioning at one of the highest levels as an NFL quarterback that we've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of quarterbacks in my time. If you talk about the top 3 quarterbacks in this league and you don't talk about Aaron Rodgers, I'm probably going to stop listening. I understand that people are going to talk about futures and what they might do and whatever. What Rodgers has done and is still doing is ridiculous. His level of efficiency and effectiveness as a quarterback is tremendous. People can talk about QB wins all they want, which aren't really a QB stat. They can talk about failure to, win rings, finish it up in the playoffs, also not purely a QB stat. But if you look me straight in the face and tell me that you don't think Aaron Rodgers is one of the top 3 quarterbacks in this league,
You're just wrong.
I don't think you're right. I just don't think you're right. We can argue all day long. I'm probably going to win that argument. So
let's look at the power structure now. They've been around for a little while, at least most of them have. And I think that the Packers, in terms of leadership at the top, are in a better place than they have been in quite some time, because not only do they have a great head coach and I think a well above average general manager and great coordinators, but I think that it's a forward thinking building. I think in terms of how they approach building a roster. It's a modern offensive team. The game management is worlds better than it was under Mike McCarthy. Like, this is the first time, well, not this specifically, but this kind of Matt LaFleur era, all 4 years of it now, is the first time where I feel like Aaron Rodgers hasn't had to do everything by himself. Where it's not like if Aaron's not having a perfect day, they're screwed. Like, they actually have won multiple games, either without Aaron himself or without Devontae. I think of the Cardinals game last year where they had no business winning that game, but the roster that Gutekunst has built, 5th year as GM, 11 years total with the organization, the offensive line, the run game, the defense, it's not just Aaron Rodgers and 21 other dudes. It's an actual cohesive organization that is built from the ground up to be successful, even if not every piece is there. Other than LaFleur and Gutekunst, who are obviously the 2 most important people there, at the coordinator level, I really love their coordinators too. Adam Stenavich, even though he is first year, I'm a big believer that even with the losses with some of the other coaches that have left over recent years, Getsy going to Chicago being a big one, I still think Stenavich is going to be just fine at offensive coordinator, especially because at the end of the day, it's Matt LaFleur's system. So as long as Matt LaFleur is head coach, whoever the offensive coordinator is, it's less important than if it was like a Mike Zimmer situation where he's completely hands-off on the offense. LaFleur being at the top is always going to give a lot more leeway to whoever the OC is. And then Joe Barry, a defensive coordinator, I think last year proved that he really knows what he's doing. I know there was this time last year we were talking about his previous stint at DC with Washington before he coached under Staley with the Rams, and we're like, we don't really know what to expect. No, when he was DC with the Packers last year and you saw them implementing a lot of the Fangio-ish concepts that he coached when he was under Staley as well, all the match quarters stuff and, the odd front stuff and some very typical Fangio simulated pressures that they seemingly called every single time it was 3rd and 6. It looked like a Vic Fangio defense, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. So even though he's quote-unquote unproven as the Packers DC, only 2 years on the job, I really only needed to see about 12 games last year before I was like, oh, he's really good at what he's doing. And I hope for Packers' sake that he stays there for a long time, because he really had that defense humming by like November. And then Rich Bisaccia, again, I got to bring up Rich Bisaccia. Even though it's first year as special teams coordinator, we saw what he did when he was in Vegas. And if that name sounds familiar to people, it's because he was the interim head coach after the John Gruden firing. And considering everything that the Raiders went through last year, they still made the playoffs because of Rich Bisaccia. So it's not just the fact that he's a good special teams coordinator. It's the fact that he's just yet another one of these voices that a locker room can rally behind, that people believe in, that is a culture builder as a special teams coordinator, which sounds weird to say, but he really is. They don't make the playoffs last year in Vegas without Bisaccia being the interim. They played for him. They killed people towards the end of the year for him. So getting him as the special teams coordinator, I thought was a coup for Green Bay, because it's just yet another good dude to add to that locker room and build that culture and, just kind of keep that dominant Packer winning way going for yet another year.
Yeah, they're not changing horses midstream here. Stenavich is just the next man up in terms of carrying that system forward. LaFleur really runs the offense. Stenavich was there last year under Getsy. He gets it. Joe Barry, very impressed with what he did and how he moved the Packers defense from where they were to where they are. And if you still, if you haven't watched the Packers in a couple of years and you think, well, it's Aaron Rodgers and, some guys that can kind of hang on defense. You didn't watch the end of last year. He had multiple guys at multiple levels of that defense playing the best football of their careers. So I'm not worried at all about Joe Barry from a Packers standpoint. From a Bears standpoint, I don't like it at all, but that's a whole different thing. And Bisaccia is a huge get for them. I would say one of the sort of two biggest veteran coaching moves, coming from a head coach to a coordinator level, the other one being in Pittsburgh with Flores. But, Rich Bisaccia, there was legitimate question as to whether or not he was going to be the next Raiders head coach when they made the decision in the offseason. And, if you'd said that midseason, I think a lot of people would have sort of poo-pooed that idea and been like, nah, it's, this is just him playing out the string. By the end of the year, there was serious momentum. He made it very difficult for them to make that choice. So didn't ultimately end up getting that job, but for LaFleur to reach out and say, hey, come be on my staff because you're a really good football coach, you're a really good guy, we could use you here, was just an under-the-radar, really, really good get for Green Bay.
Adam Stenovich, by the way, when he got elevated from offensive line coach and run game coordinator to offensive coordinator, that then created a vacancy for, I don't want to say a Bears legend, but Bears legend adjacent assistant coach to then move up the ranks and become the new offensive line coach, head offensive line coach. And not going to lie, every time I see his name on the Packers website, it just pisses me off a little bit more.
That's funny because today, the day we're recording this, not the day it comes out, on Twitter, Jarrett Payton posted a little Twitter short. And he was like, when I got cut from the Titans, the Packers reached out and asked if I wanted to come in for a tryout. And I said, hell no, because Peyton is never going on a green and gold jersey. He said, well, I have all the respect in the world.
They're just going to keep collecting all of them, from those early Bears teams.
He's
really more mid Bears teams.
Yeah, he was like, nope, I have all the respect in the world for Green Bay and the Packers. There was no way I was going to try out for them and make that team. So notable coaches on offense for the Packers. There's a couple we're going to bring up. First one is Tom Clements, the QB coach. 22 years of NFL coaching experience. If you know anything about quarterback coaching, you've heard the name Tom Clements. He's been around a long time and worked with a lot of successful quarterbacks. Interesting thing about Clements is, as a player, he led Notre Dame to an undefeated season in a national championship in 1973, and then went on to play 12 seasons in the CFL. Not only play, he was a 7-time Division All-Star. He was the league MVP in 1987, 2-time Grey Cup champion, that's the CFL Super Bowl, and he's in the CFL Hall of Fame. So as a player, a lot of people are like, oh, he played in the CFL. He didn't just play in the CFL. He was the most valuable player. He won a couple cups, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So knows what he's doing on the football field and has translated a lot of that knowledge into a very long and distinguished coaching career. You can't just bring anybody in to be the quarterback coach when you've got a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, very cerebral, very opinionated, very good at what he does. He's not going to respond to just any Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street. He needs somebody that has a deep understanding of the position, and Clements is one of the few guys in the league that fits the bill perfectly for them. So very important coach. And then the one you referenced in the open, Luke Butkus, the offensive line coach, former NFL and NFL Europe O-lineman with the Bears, Chargers, Fire, and Centurions, and he is the nephew of NFL Hall of Famer Dick Butkus. Obviously, the name sounds familiar. Luke played at Illinois.
Oh, does it? Oh, does it, EJ?
A little bit. Some people have heard of that guy. I hope they should. If they haven't, look him up. But Luke played at Illinois, joined the Bears, moved on to the Chargers, and then ended up extending his career in NFL Europe. But gets to work with a very good and very versatile group of linemen. We were talking about this pre-show that the Packers have I would say, one of the most versatile O-lines in the league. They have multiple guys that can play multiple spots well. And you might think that's the norm in the NFL because they're all great athletes or whatever else. It's not. Certainly not at the level they do it at. So he gets to sort of inherit that really good, very flexible group. And yeah, it's a lot of responsibility. He has to keep Aaron Rodgers standing, and I'm sure that's a demanding job, but he's got a lot of great parts to work with there. On defense and special teams, got to start with Jerry Gray, the defensive back coach and passing game coordinator, former Titans defensive coordinator. Jerry himself, another very successful player, former first-round draft pick, played 9 seasons in the NFL, was a consensus 2-time All-American at Texas and 2-time Southwest Conference Defensive Player of the Year as a safety.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Like, safeties don't win a lot of awards. It's very difficult to do all that stuff 2 years in a row, his final 2 years at Texas. Very decorated player, very established and experienced NFL defensive coach as well. So just another sort of arrow in the quiver of the Packers coaching staff to have him on the sidelines. Kirk Olivadotti, the inside linebackers coach, 19 seasons worth of NFL coaching experience, and he's the son of longtime NFL and CFB coach Tom Olivadotti, who was at Miami when they won their national championship and worked all around the NFL. So if the name Olivadotti sounds familiar, it's probably his dad, Tom. Kirk himself, been around 20 years, still trying to come out from under the shadow of his dad because his dad had so much success, but a great coach in his own right and did a great job last year with Devondre Campbell. And Michael Spurlock, this was one. So special teams quality control coach. I was like, is that? It's got to be. Same one. First player in Bucs history to return a kickoff for a touchdown and the only player in Chargers history to return a kickoff and a punt for a touchdown in the same season. So Michael Spurlock, I think about as, besides just being an analyst on an NFL coaching staff, being a special teams quality control coach is breaking in terms of coaching, but he's going to be able to tell anybody that plays special teams on the Packers, like, no, I know how to do this. It's okay. You can believe me. It's not something I read in a book. Here's my YouTube highlights. I'm sure he's got them on his phone. But
by the way, can I just say how insane it is that for as long as the Buccaneers have been around at this point, it took till the late 2000s to get a kickoff return for a touchdown? Are you kidding me?
There are weird stats out there that you kick across and you go, no. That's not. Surely they did it before that. Absolutely. They must have. They've been around, blah, blah, blah. And you look and nope, there's just some weird outliers where stuff doesn't happen for a long time. That is definitely one of them. But great group of coaches, great mix of experience. And they seem to have succession down. They know they're going to have success. Multiple coaches have sort of been calved off the top of that organization, like Luke Getsy, and moved on to other places. They always seem to have a ready replacement, and you don't get these big swings in the overall quality of the performance on the field. It's somebody that was already there, coaching the system for 3 or 4 years, knows, okay, now you're stepping up, they're ready. They seem to have that sort of grooming process really well dialed, and it shows in the consistency of the product they put on the field.
Yeah, no, it's one of the most stable organizations in sports, always has been, always will be. I firmly believe that. Well, as long as they have Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Maybe,
I was going to say, 30 years worth of Hall of Fame quarterbacking in a row will do that too.
It's been decades since they haven't had one, so I don't know. Maybe one day. We'll see. Although I just know that as soon as Rodgers retires, there's going to be like some contract dispute with Justin Herbert, and he's going to get traded to Green Bay and just start this nightmare all over again. I just know it. I can feel it in my bones.
Don't you put that evil on me, Coleman. Don't you do that.
Anyway, I kind of want to get to the meat of this episode, which is framing the roster losses with their extensions together. Normally we kind of, do all the roster losses first and then the retentions and then the third party additions. We're going to throw up, a big screen of all of their roster losses first, but I really want to put the notable losses and the extensions together on one screen so that you can see them together, because they all kind of had something to do with each other. When you look at where the Packers entered into this offseason cap-wise, they were not in good shape. They had virtually no money to work with. In fact, they were well over the cap, and they had to do a whole bunch of restructures to get back under the cap. It was like $45 million over the cap or something like that. They were a slightly less egregious version of the Saints. And so they had to do a whole lot of moves, both in terms of cutting players and extending players and restructuring players and asking veterans to take pay cuts just to get to like $1 million under the cap. And so before we even get to the Davante Adams trade, which in itself freed up like $20 million or something like that, before we even got there, these were all of the moves they made to collectively free up $81.7 million in cap space. Extensions, Preston Smith, Aaron Rodgers, Jair Alexander, which by themselves are an unbelievable amount of money, but at least for this year, it freed up $8.3 million for the Preston Smith deal. $18.1 million was relieved from this year's cap hit in the Aaron Rodgers extension. Jair Alexander's new deal freed up $6.2 million. In terms of restructures, Kenny Clark's restructure freed up $10.9 this year. Aaron Jones's restructure freed up $3.1. David Bakhtiari's restructure freed up $7.7. And Adrian Amos's restructure freed up $4.7 million. They outright cut Zadarius Smith because they had to choose between one Smith brother or the other. They chose Preston Smith, especially because Rashawn Gary was one of the very best pass rushers in all of football last year. Was third in total pressures for the league. They weren't going to keep all three of those guys. So they cut Zadarius Smith. He was dealing with injury issues. That freed up $14.6 million. And they also cut Billy Turner, who is relatively underperforming at right tackle anyway, and offensive line, at least now after the draft, is very deep for them. So they didn't really need Billy Turner anymore. Cut him, freed up $2.7. And then they knocked $5.5 million off from Randall Cobb, who took a pay cut to stay in Green Bay and make one last run with Aaron. So that's how they got $81.7 million. And then they traded Davante Adams. Because even after all of that, the Davante situation had deteriorated to a point where it seems like there was really no way out of that. It has been reported that they offered more than Green Bay, and he wanted to go to Vegas anyway. I'm sure the truth was somewhere in the middle, but even going into free agency last year, before free agency even happened, it was reported that he bought a big-ass house over in Vegas, which kind of told you where he was leaning regardless. He wanted to go play with his best friend Derek Carr. I get it. I totally do. But all in all, that left them with a pretty decent amount of cap space this year. If you look at 2022 cap space, they have the 6th most remaining cap space in the league right now at roughly $17 million. Now, did the Packers use that $17 million to then go buy somebody else or trade for somebody else, try to fill in, some holes in the receiving core or anything like that? No, not really. When you look at third-party additions, really the only two that we even need to note are Jerron Reed and Sammy Watkins, who collectively are $5 million total. And you might be wondering, okay, why did they do that? They freed up all this money. They got not just under the cap, but well under the cap. They have more money than most other teams in the league. Why didn't they then go spend it? Well, they can't. If you look at their 2023 cap space, they're actually once again positioned to be well over the cap next year before we get to restructures and everything like that. They have the 8th fewest amount of cap space in 2023, and in fact, they're about $7.4 million over the cap. And that's mainly because looking at their 2023 cap hits, that's when a lot of the stuff that they did this year is starting to balloon out next year. So Aaron Rodgers' cap number next year is $31.6 million. David Bakhtiari's is $29 million. Kenny Clark's is $24 million. Jair Alexander costs $20 million. Aaron Jones costs $20 million for a running back. Good Lord. Rashawn Gary costs almost $11 million. And then we got Preston Smith at $13 million. So again, the core of this team is still incredibly expensive next year. So they weren't about to spend a whole bunch of money this year because they're going to have to go through this song and dance again 11 months from now. So that's where we stand. They couldn't keep the entire core together. It was mathematically impossible. They had to make moves. They had to free up money. They extended who they could. They restructured who they could. They kept Aaron, which in the end was obviously the most important thing. But you knew that somebody was going to draw the short straw here. And it was inevitably going to be Zadarius Smith. And then Devontae chose to go to Vegas, seemingly. All in all, considering the circumstances, I think Brian Gutekunst did as good a job as he possibly could have. There was really no scenario where everybody stayed, so he did what he could, and the roster is still in a mostly good spot, other than a few key holes that we'll talk about when we address the draft.
We talked about this in the middle of last season, and you said it before I did, that with all the tumult, with all the upheaval, with all the uncertainty surrounding Aaron, there was no sure thing about him coming back to Green Bay this year. Looked like he might be the guy that gets traded to the Broncos or retires or does whatever else. The Jordan Love start pretty much solidified, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Like at that point, Green Bay pivoted and said, we need to throw ourselves on our swords no matter what and get Aaron back in this building. And for as many years as he'll give us, there is, and you said there's no other option. They have to do this. And I wasn't quite so sure. There was a lot of smoke around that for a long time. It made the most sense, but I wasn't sure they could pull it off. The fact that they did, that they are here from there, is a really impressive stretch of reversal by the front office. They had been sort of beating the war drums and throwing their quarterback under the bus as much as a front office will do. It was acrimonious, to say the least, and to be here now with Aaron back for another year and sitting basically atop the division with lots of their talent still intact, I would say most of their high-end talent still in the building, it's an amazing move. But make no mistake, it was the one start from the guy they drafted in the first round, and they said, nope, we're not willing to deal with that. We will take Aaron Rodgers for any cost, for any length of time. We'll do whatever we have to do now and in the future to throw up a huge balloon of money. I'm always really fascinated when people say, oh, the Packers are a small market team. They don't spend money. I'm like, they're spending $101 million on 5 guys in this list this year. Mm-hmm. 5 guys. Yeah, one of them is Rodgers at 50, but Preston Smith at 13, Jair at 21, Devondre Campbell at 10 for an inside linebacker, Russell Douglas, who they re-signed, 7. All those guys are good players. They're spending $101 million on 5 guys. Don't tell me the Packers don't spend money. They do spend money. They're spending it hand over fist right now to keep that window pried open for as long as Aaron Rodgers wants to keep slinging a football for them, because they know that's the key. Now, no sure path to get there, but they got it done, and therefore they're going to reap the rewards again. If they hadn't been able to do that, if they'd kept Devontae, one reason or another, and Aaron had left, we'd be having a very different discussion on this podcast.
I think the parallels between the one game that Pat Mahomes started in 2017, the very last game of 2017, where it was against Denver, and he made some just ridiculous throws because, of course, he's Pat Mahomes. That was even before people outside of the Chiefs building knew what Pat Mahomes was going to be. People inside the Chiefs building were like, oh, yeah, no, that's normal for him. But the rest of the world was like, holy shit, okay, they got something there. That one game was really what solidified them moving on from Alex Smith the following year. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the one game against the Chiefs, from Jordan Love, I think solidified the opposite of we already have a superhuman at quarterback. Let's not do anything to rock that boat and fuck this up any more than it already is. Let's just throw $50 million at him. We'll let him get some weird astrology tattoo and go do his ayahuasca retreats in the offseason. He's going to do whatever he's going to do, but as long as he's doing it while playing football for us, we don't care. That's their general mindset right now. And to be honest, I don't really blame them. Just based on what we've seen from Jordan Love, I don't blame them at all.
I can just see in my mind's eye, and this is just what I want to see, Goody just like kicking open the door to the conference room, saying to Aaron, let's not be rash.
Yeah.
What is it you'd like? We'll start with that. Here's a blank piece of paper. You write that number down, and we'll go back to our office, fire up the calculators, and get it done, because we know where we need to go, and we're 100% sure, and we will kiss the ring right now. And that's what this is. This is Green Bay kissing the ring and saying, we will keep you here because we've seen the other side, and we want no part of it.
And I think that's probably as good a transition as any into talking about their draft, because looking at their draft, and this was going into the draft with information that Devontae was gone. At that point, he was gone. Their number one receiver was Sammy Watkins or Alan Lazard. We were screaming from the rafters, don't just use your first round pick on a wide receiver. Use both of them on a wide receiver. You can't take any chances here. And then when the top two picks came in and they were on defense, we were losing our minds. We're like, what are they doing? This is the exact opposite of how you're supposed to make Aaron Rodgers happy. And then day 2 happened. And then day 3 happened. And at least for me, I don't know about you, made me go back to, okay, in Goody we trust. Because not only did they not panic, I was panicking. I'm not even a Packers fan. I was panicking. Not only did Goody not panic, and he just stuck to his board and he took the best players, but looking at who he took on day 2 and day 3, they probably got them 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 rounds later than I thought they should have gone, and actually ended up with a stronger overall class because they just stuck to their board, which is why Goody is a professional GM and I'm not. So off the top of this, before you go through the picks one by one, I just want to say he was right, I was wrong, and thank God that he is the GM. On behalf of Packers fans, at least, thank God he is the GM of the Packers, because I would have drafted entirely differently and probably ended up with a worse class.
Totally possible, especially looking at what he was able to accomplish with their 11 picks. I'll start off with the bad news. I love this class. That's bad news. Great news for Packers fans, not great news for me. I love this class, and that, like I said at the top of the show, is not uncommon. I typically have at least a couple of draft crushes that I'm in love with after my months of draft study that end up going to the Packers. Most notably in recent history, Darnell Savage was one of those guys. Loved Darnell Savage. He ends up going to the Packers. Of course he does. They do it all the time. But there are 3 picks in this draft that I don't have strong feelings about one way or another positively. I'm just kind of like meh. And 2 of them are 7th rounders. And the other one is the very first one they made. So there's a lot to sort of unpack here about first impressions. And a lot of Packers fans felt the same way. So round 1, pick 22, Quay Walker, inside linebacker from Georgia. Quay Walker is a fine player. He is possibly, well, not possibly, he was my 3rd rated out of the trio of Georgia linebackers that came out this year. He was my number 3. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's not. He's a very talented athlete, great size, really good range. But you and I talked about linebackers doing linebackery things, and we've trademarked that term now. We're going to have a T-shirt that says linebackery. Quay Walker was possibly the least best at doing the linebackery things. Make splash plays, but his 2 running mates at Georgia were higher on my board because they were better at those things. Okay, in Goody we trust. Let's see what happens with Quay Walker. Then the picks start to roll in that I really like. 2nd pick in the first round, 6 picks later, pick 28, Devontae Wyatt, defensive tackle, Georgia. In my mind, the best sort of pure 3-tech penetrating defensive tackle in this draft. Great get at the end of the first round. The rich get richer. A very strong defensive line gets another very strong piece from a good program. No issues with that. Round 2, pick 53. One of the guys I really liked, who was on our 10 gems list, Christian Watson, wide receiver, North Dakota State. Tall, freakish. A lot of people worry about the drop rate. I wouldn't so much. He's going to need a year. Is he going to make all those plays this year? Nope. That's not why they drafted him. He is the down-the-line replacement for X. They want him to be the big guy outside that runs deep routes, is insanely athletic. He's got all the tools. Let's see how he polishes up. But a great get, and that's where I think Packers fans started to exhale a little bit and go, okay, he's not going to go the whole draft and not pick a wide receiver. Pick 3, round 3, pick 92. One of our favorites, Sean Ryan, the offensive guard from UCLA, played tackle at UCLA. Everybody in the world knew he was going to be a guard. Super powerful. Again, brings that flexibility that the Packers love on their offensive line. Can play 2 positions, already has. Is going to slot in, I would say, sooner rather than later as a starting guard for the Packers. He absolutely has that kind of potential. Round 4, pick 132, Romeo Doubs, wide receiver, Nevada. Carson Strong's big target there. Underrated, probably because he played at Nevada. I think gained a little bit of momentum, but was sort of more, you heard more about Doubs in the back channel than you did on all the splashy boards of who's going to get drafted first. Would I be terribly surprised if Doubs ended up having a better NFL career than Christian Watson? I wouldn't. Christian Watson has way more potential. I think Doubs right now is probably a better wide receiver. Now, might not stay that way, but he is a quality get in round 4. Great grab by Goody and the staff. Round 4, pick 140, 8 picks later, Zach Tom, offensive lineman, Wake Forest. One of the most athletic offensive linemen in this draft. Can play tackle. A lot of people talked about him playing center. Is this a theme? Yes, this is a theme. The Packers love offensive linemen with versatility. Zach Tom picked up a lot of momentum in the last 6 weeks before the draft as a very chic potential pick at offensive line. If you just watched his pass sets, if you just watched Zach Tom's pass sets, you would have absolutely balked at the idea that he was available anywhere near round 4. His pass sets are pretty, like really, really good. I know you had him more highly ranked than I did. Great
was
get
a first round pick.
I know.
I was unreasonably high on Zach Tom.
Yes, I would agree. Unreasonably is a great word there. Round 5, pick 179. One of my favorites that I think is terribly underrated. Kingsley Enagbare, outside linebacker, South Carolina. You can call him 5-tech. You can call him edge. It'd be really interesting to see how they use him. I think they slot him in behind Preston Smith and or Rashawn Gary both. Find out what they like him better as in their system. But very productive guy at South Carolina with a lot of power. Needs a counter move pretty badly, but beat some very good tackles soundly. So to be able to get a guy like that in the 5th round, again, not typical in the draft. More players in this draft, very deep edge class. You're going to get lucky sometimes. The Packers do it again. Now, round 7, one of the aforementioned picks I wasn't super wild about. Pick 228, Tariq Carpenter, linebacker, Georgia Tech. Neither here nor there. But you're talking about a 7th rounder, so that's fine. If they love him and they met with him and they like his attitude and his skills, he's going to start off fighting for a special team spot, being a practice squad backup. That's fine as a 7th round pick. They had 4 picks in the 7th round. Their second was pick 234, Jonathan Ford, the DT from Miami, University of Miami. That was the other 7th round pick. I was like, meh. But again, you're talking about dart throws. You're talking about lottery tickets. You're talking about 7th round picks. They have 2 more of them, and man, they nailed them both. This hurt my heart. This was just Goody and his staff like putting out their cigarette on my chest because pick 249, Rasheed Walker, the offensive tackle from Penn State, who I had a much higher rank on than that. I would have been perfectly comfortable if somebody, cough, cough, Bears had picked him anywhere after the middle of the 3rd round. I think he's got great potential. If you don't agree with me, watch the Michigan game. Yes, he had his fair share of losses, but he also had a ton of wins against 2 guys that should have been first-round pass rushers. Hutchinson was, and Ajabo, who popped his Achilles at his pro day, would have been if he hadn't popped his Achilles. He would have gone in the 1st round. So Rasheed Walker, I think, has tons of potential. The fact they got him in the 7th round tells me there was something going on there. Could have been injuries, could have been off the field, something we didn't see because the tape said this is way better than a 7th round offensive tackle. And then their last pick, 258, Samori Toure, the wide receiver from Nebraska, speedster. Got to see him at the Shrine Bowl. He will tear the top off. I could see him playing in the slot next year for the Packers, and that being a very, very good thing as exactly that, the speed slot threat to just be the can opener. get out there, deep fly post, everything, just tear safeties off and make them run with him because he is a legit low 4.3 guy. He's tall enough. He's got good hands. He quietly had a very good week at Shrine Bowl. Wasn't as good underneath. Again, didn't run the full route tree at Nebraska, but when he got to open his legs up, very few people could handle him, and you could just see the panic from DBs when he really opened up stride because they knew he was super fast. So top to bottom, 11 picks, stock the roster. When I'm worrying about 7th-round picks as the only 2 I didn't really like, that's a nailed draft top to bottom.
He reminded me, Samori Toure, I should say, reminded me a little bit, and I'm not saying he is, but I think in terms of body type and skill set coming out of the draft, I thought it was pretty similar to Kenny Stills, who himself was a day 3 pick, you know, coming out of the Big 12. He was also like 190, 195 when he was at OU, roughly the same size. Much faster in pads than time speed, I would say, for Kenny Stills, even though Kenny Stills timed well. When you go back and watch those OU teams from, the early 2010s, there was not a soul in the country that could run with him. And I think Samori Toure is potentially of a similar mold. Now, the other 2 receivers that they took, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, massive fan of both of them. Will they start for this team? Maybe not week 1, because Aaron Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks that heavily relies on communication and, reading the defense a certain way because there's side adjusts all over this offense. And, he and Devontae oftentimes just kind of make shit up as they go, just based on little glances to each other. It's a big reason why he wanted Randall Cobb back and why he not even lobbied, demanded that they bring Randall Cobb back, was because Cobb knew how to read defenses the way that Rodgers does. And that's the number one quality he looks for in a receiver. It's not just physical talent, but can you read a defense the same way that I read a defense? Whether it was Jordy, Devontae, Cobb, James Jones, any of those guys. That's the one shared quality all of them have. So do I think that Watson and Doubs will start early? Probably not, because they don't have the experience with Rodgers yet to know pre-snap how he's going to read a certain look and how they should be adjusting their route. Cobb does, Lazard does. Those maybe Amari Rodgers does a little bit, but I don't really have a whole lot of faith in Amari Rodgers at this point. So yeah, but those are going to be the 2 starting receivers, at least at first. Eventually, once Watson and Doubs learn more about how Rodgers reads, and obviously he's working with them in camp and coaching them up and doing his coach on the field type stuff, eventually towards the back half of the season, I do expect them to get significant snaps and push for a starting role, because Watson is more talented than Lazard. And he's, at this point in their careers, much more talented than Cobb. And Doubs is also extremely talented. As they get more experience, they will get more on the field, to the point where once we get to December and January, wouldn't be shocked if they come out in 11 personnel, it's Lazard, Watson, and Doubs, not Lazard, Cobb, and Watkins. So that's how I kind of see it. Is it's an investment in the future. So the first half of the season might be a little rough compared to what we're used to seeing, but by the back half, they'll probably be fine. The Quay Walker pick, I'm right there with you. I saw him as the 3rd of the Georgia linebackers, but all of the Georgia linebackers were awesome. So it's not like he's a bad player. It's more just, he was in the same rotation as Nakobe Dean and Channing Tindall, who were both fucking amazing. So I was lower on that pick solely because I was so zeroed in on receiver, and if you're going to take a linebacker, I at least would have wanted it to be, maybe Devin Lloyd, who was available at that time. So I was a little bit annoyed at it, but it's not that it was a bad pick. It's just based on my own individual grades. It's not what I would have done. They did make up for it.
Yeah, this is your classic, right? If you'd taken Christian Watson and Quay Walker and swapped them.
Oh, flip them. I would have been totally cool.
You would have been like, yes.
Yeah, I would have been great with it, because Watson was one of my 5 highest graded receivers in this class.
Right.
Now, they got lucky. They got him in the 2nd round. So in the end, it ended up not mattering. But in the gap between the 22nd pick and what was Watson, the 53rd pick,
Yeah.
In those 31 picks in between, I was sweating bullets the whole time because I'm like, oh my God, there's only 2 guys left on the board that I thought could have been wide receiver ones, and it was Watson and George Pickens. I didn't think that they were going to get either of them, and they ended up both being available. They ended up getting Watson. So, again, it worked out, but going into day 2, after seeing what they got on day 1, I was, on behalf of Packers fans, I was nervous, to say the least, because they still had not addressed the position at that point. Devontae Wyatt, I do think, is going to get significant snaps early on because right now he's basically just competing with Lowry and Reed to be next to Kenny Clark. And I think at least in third down situations, he's going to be the one next to Kenny in nickel. In base, I could see him, maybe not starting in base, but in minimum in nickel, he's going to be on the field because other than Kenny Clark himself, he's the best interior pass rusher they've got. And then one last thing, I want to talk about the offensive linemen, Sean Ryan and Zach Tom. When you look at how their offensive line shook out last year, there was a lot of shuffling going on, but that's nothing that Green Bay's not used to. Myers got hurt, so then Lucas Patrick had to shift over to center, and then Newman had to play guard, and then Myers came back, and so then Patrick shifted back over to guard, and Newman went to the bench, and then Myers got hurt again, and they had to reshuffle, and Elton Jenkins plays everything, so it doesn't even really matter, and Bakhtiari was hurt. So everybody was just constantly kind of moving around, and they still made it work because they have amazing offensive line coaches. When they took Sean Ryan and Zach Tom, even though both of them played tackle, both of them are going to be interior players for them. But the good news is that both of them could move around and shuffle just like we're used to seeing with Packers offensive linemen. So Zach Tom, even if he's, a backup guard to Newman and Runyon, I still think that he could push Josh Myers to be the starting center because I think he's more talented than Josh Myers is. Not that there's nothing against Josh Myers, but I think Zach Tom is an amazing prospect. You go watch him against Jermaine Johnson. He absolutely dominated Jermaine Johnson, who was a first-round edge rusher. Like, Zach Tom took his lunch money. So, yeah, he could either be a backup guard, or he could be a backup tackle, or he could be a backup center, or even push to be a starting center, just like a young Elton Jenkins was. And then Sean Ryan, I think, is going to push both Runyon and Newman at guard as well. And this is nothing against Runyon and Newman, but I think Sean Ryan is incredibly powerful, and being a tackle convert to the inside, I think that he possesses a lot of the same qualities as Runyon and Newman, but might even have more power in his punch than those two. So I loved this third and fourth round tandem of offensive linemen because they can push no fewer than 3 guys to be starters on the interior, even as rookies. And then if Bakhtiari is healthy, and if Jenkins stays healthy, you got 2 incredible bookend tackles as well. So the offensive line is not just in as good a shape as it was last year. It might be in even better shape than it was last year. And that's saying a lot because this is already one of the best offensive lines in the entire league.
Fully agree that the cupboard is more well-stocked and more well-stocked with players that fit the system and the culture, and those are a little bit different in Green Bay. The system is the one we talked about. That's LaFleur's system, formerly run by Getsy, being inherited by an assistant coach now, and so that's the system. So they have the skills to run that, but they also have that versatility, the experience at multiple positions, power. They're both really good fits, and like I said, I love this draft class, and I hate that. So this is a love-hate moment. They didn't stop there. They had a pretty sizable UDFA class. Not as many standouts, but again, Goody and his staff, when they go to the 7th round and then into the UDFA process, because that all kind of mixes together depending on who gets picked and who doesn't, they tend to look for different things than I do. The Packers in years past have not had what I would consider super high-end UDFA classes. They don't go for the names. There are specific qualities that they like. Might be analytics, might be game tape performance, might be what their coaches say. But their eye for that sort of lower-end talent's a little bit different. As it was, lots and lots of players. Only want to highlight 2. Tyler Goodson, the running back from Iowa. Watched his tape fairly late because he was sort of a third-tier running back for me. He's got pop in their system. He doesn't They don't need him in any stretch of the imagination. They have a very good running back room right now, but he could provide value for them. And if they stash him on the practice squad, I don't think anybody's coming to get him. Again, he went undrafted. Every team had multiple shots at him. But there's something there in certain plays, especially sort of that slash inside Iowa middle zone. He has a knack. He had a ton of success there doing that. So he was sort of one of those players that caught my eye in this list. Sorry, I lied. It's 3. Ryder Anderson, the edge from Indiana, raw, but showed some good flash on film. Don't know if he stuck. And then Ellis Brooks, the linebacker from Penn State. Think he should have been drafted just as a special teams demon alone. The fact that the Packers pick him up for free again out of a sort of talented rotation of 3 linebackers that came out of Penn State. The fact that he slipped through the 7th round and they get Ellis Brooks for free. Ellis Brooks can play, and I mean in base defense can play.
He'll make it for sure.
He has to continue developing, but right now you just got yourself a special teams ace for nothing. So while they didn't have ton of name and lights types, 5 of these guys are going to stick guaranteed because they always do on the Packers.
Yeah, and considering the amount of roster shedding they had to do for all their cap stuff, this is a roster that I think is makeable for UDFAs. The top 22, outside of a couple position groups, is excellent, but the depth, I think, still needs to be replenished to several position groups, and I think there's a lot of openings here that are possible, especially for Ryder Anderson, Ellis Brooks, Tyler Goodson.
I just looked him up. They didn't keep him.
Anderson's gone already?
Yeah, he was a camp invite, so he didn't sign a contract. He was a show up and we'll see if we want to keep you. He's not currently on their roster. It doesn't mean they won't bring him back. They took a look at him. Of course, their medical staff got a look. So that's another benefit that I think a lot of people don't assign to these either camp invites or tryout type players is you get them in your building. You get to talk to them. You get to run them around a little bit. You get to look at them if you have a question about an injury history, combine recheck, that kind of a thing. So doesn't mean he won't be there in the future, but he's not currently on the roster.
That's really surprising to me considering their edge depth, or rather lack of edge depth. Their edge 3 right now, which is the guy that's coming in, to give Gary and Preston Smith a breather, is Enigbare, their rookie 5th round pick. They don't got anybody else. Unless you're really a fan of Randy Ramsey or Jonathan Garvin, they don't got anybody else. I have to imagine by the end of preseason, when people are going through waivers and everything like that, they're going to have to get another one. They have to. Or a vet minimum guy. They're way too thin at that spot. I love the starting tandem. Starting tandem's incredible. Everything after that could use a little bit of work.
It's not unlike the Vikings, who we talked about yesterday. When you look at that, especially on defense, the starters on defense, incredible, right? Front to back, they really are great. And in some positions, they have good depth. In some positions, if they take a couple of injuries, it's not going to be a pretty picture for them. So it really is that, look at the starters, pay attention. Some positions on defense, not super well stocked.
All right, final segment, team floor, team ceiling. Kind of mentioned it yesterday. Even though I have a ceiling 1 win higher than the Vikings of 12 wins, it is possible for them to get to 12 wins as a ceiling. That number is literally just out of deference to Aaron Rodgers. In terms of most likely win total, I have them at probably 11, right where I have the Vikings. I think they're both going to be at about 11, maybe 10, depending on how quickly they can get off the ground. Because again, the receiver problem is a problem. I can't imagine they're going to be below 9. That's my floor. It would take an injury to Rodgers for that to even be conceivable. But I'm not 100% sure that the gap between them and the Vikings is even a gap anymore. If you put Devontae Adams on this roster, it's not even a question. Without Devontae Adams, I can't firmly say that Green Bay is going to win this division. So it's possible they get to 12 just because Aaron Rodgers is a demigod. Is it likely? I can't say so at this point. I think the loss of Adams is just too important. He was everything to them in terms of, those gotta have it plays where he and Aaron just glance at each other and make shit up on the spot. It's a very similar connection to how Kelsey and Mahomes operate, where there's whatever play is called, and then there's what Aaron and Devontae are doing. And it could be based on split, leverage, alignment, the freedom that he has within calls to just kind of adjust his route, knowing that Aaron reads defenses the same way as him. That element is gone, and I can't count how many times that element dug them out of seemingly impossible holes at the end of games. All of these fourth quarter comebacks that we're used to seeing with Rodgers, a lot of them were made possible because he and Devontae doing impossible shit together. That togetherness is no longer together, for lack of a better way to say it. I don't have full confidence without Devontae there being the safety blanket in Rodgers being able to pull out 12 wins again. And it's not that the Packers are a bad team. They're a great team. But rarely have I ever seen a receiver be this important to a football team. And I just can't confidently say that there is a gap anymore between them and the Vikings.
There's a gap, and it's Aaron Rodgers. The gap is more narrow. We talked about this last night and again tonight. It's still there because it's still Aaron Rodgers. To your point, there's going to be a lot more frustration. There are going to be a lot more times when he looks for that, expects it because he's very used to it, and it's not there. Somebody doesn't get open, somebody drops that ball, the conversion doesn't occur, and we're going to have to see how he weathers that disappointment because he has shown lots of disappointment. He shows disappointment on his sleeve. He chucks iPads on the sideline, Microsoft Surfaces. Didn't mean it, Microsoft. Like, when he's frustrated, people know. It's not a secret. And he's going to be more frustrated because he cannot just whip it up to the best receiver in football anymore and expect great shit to happen. So there is a gap. It is smaller, and until he's gone, this division is theirs because he will will it to be so. Now, if he gets injured, sure, but my ceiling and floor are the same as yours. Ceiling is 12. I just don't think they're going to rip off 13, but they do have great stability. They do have a great offensive line. They do have great running backs and a very good running game to go with it. Their defense is very good, and like you said at the end of last season, was playing at a high enough level to not only keep them in games, but get them back in some games when they needed it. So I really do think double-digit wins, absolutely. 12, I could see that as likely. Do I think they get to 13? I don't, because Devontae not being there is going to cost them a game or two at the end. Are they still going to have the Vikings number? Until the Vikings prove otherwise or Aaron Rodgers is hurt, yeah, they still have the Vikings number, and I'm not going to bet against them.
Spoken like a traumatized Bears fan.
100%. I've seen it too many times, and it's so funny. There was national games last year outside the NFC North when the Packers were playing outside the division, and people were like, he's only got like 54 seconds. He's not going to. I was like,
knew
I'm
it was
like,
coming.
Shut up, people. Like, you didn't know that he just feeds off that. It's like, Vecna, like, don't do it. Like, no. And they did, and he did, and then he smiled, gave that little smirk, nodded, yep, that's what I do. I do it all the time. Oh, you're not familiar with that? Wait 4 years. I'll come back to town, do it again. So until that's over, like, they still have their spot on top of the hill, and they will still, the Vikings might come and take their lunch money once, not at Lambeau, right? When they come to Lambeau, all bets are off. That place is an unassailable fortress. I mean, they were perfect there last year. Wake me up when Rodgers decides to hang him up, and I'll tell you that the Packers aren't going to be in the mix for the top of the division, top of the conference, and, a fairly assured playoff spot.
If he keeps smoking all this peyote in the desert, whatever it's doing to his body, it's doing something right, because I don't think he's ever going to stop, man. He's like 38 and still throws like he's 25. He and Brady, I don't understand how they are completely defying what should be physically possible. Like, we're used to seeing quarterbacks their age disintegrate. Peyton was disintegrating at this age.
Yeah.
Rodgers coming off back-to-back MVPs. He's playing better than he ever has. It's How? You're a grandparent in NFL years, and he's better than everybody. Pisses me off, man. Pisses me off.
I am of two minds about that. It pisses me off, but I put that aside long ago because I was so used to it happening. And now I just enjoy it. Because if you can't enjoy Aaron Rodgers playing football as a football fan, you can't enjoy football. Like, that is some of the most beautiful football being played today. He plays that position like no one else does. And even Tom says, no, he's more gifted than I am. He has not won near as much as Tom. And I'm not saying he is greater than Tom, because Tom's legacy is cemented as the greatest quarterback of all time. Rodgers, even Tom says, nope, Rodgers is way more talented, physically talented than I am. And if you can't appreciate him sort of rolling out and just flipping a ball off his back foot 40 yards, 2 inches over the coverage hand into the waiting arms of the receiver over and over and over again, we're like callous to it. I mean, I know Packers fans are callous to it because they think it's completely normal. And it's like, that's not normal. Very few people on the planet can do that. Like 5.
I don't know. They saw one game of non-Rodgers when Love came in. They're like, oh, shit, that's what the rest of the league deals with.
Ask them if they remember that. They'll be like, what are you talking about? Most of them just blacked out. And I don't mean from drinking. I just mean they saw that and like it flipped the register. It just reset the computer. They were like, what? No, that's supposed to be complete. Like, that always gets complete. I'll just go to next week. Like, they don't even acknowledge that game occurred because it is so traumatic.
Oh, God. Well, we're not done with the NFC North. We're coming back tomorrow talking probably significantly more Packers when we're doing our NFC North macro recap, making predictions for the division, as well as award predictions within the division, MVP, Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, of course, division winner, all that kind of stuff. So if you're a Packers fan listening to this and you want to hear even more praise about your own team, because I'm sure plenty of it is coming, feel free to come back tomorrow, same time, same place. And if you're not a Packers fan and you are just watching and listening and trying to catch up on every single team, all 40 episodes we're doing in the series, thank you. We appreciate it. Couldn't do this without you guys, so cheers to you. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning. Friday. Sorry, time is a blur at this point. We'll see you all tomorrow for that. And until then, we love you. Later.
Take care.